So, okay, I guess this is very topical, and there are many tshuvas which have come out from different rabbis, contemporary rabbis, about what's going on with the present situation. With and we're going to begin. Now, some people will say this is applicable. Some people will say it's not applicable. But in Siman Tafkuf Ayin Vav in Orach Chaim, where it speaks about the laws, says Al Ezid Var Mesanim Masrim. So this is the laws of fasting, and there's a siman that says when there are tragedies going on, what to do. And just before we begin this, Shir Shabila Ili Nishmas, Yeshua ben Yamin ben Rivka should have a refuah shlema very completely. Okay, so the Shulchan Aruch says, and this is based on the Gemara. So once again, Siman Tafkuf Ayin Vav. It speaks about when there are various tragedies, fasting. And one of them, it goes in Sif Beis about Dever, which is pestilence. If there's Dever Be'ir, if there are 500 people which die, if there's a city of 500 people and 3 die within 3 days, so that is the definition of Dever. This is based on the Gemara Tainus. And so that's Dever. But if they die in 1 day or 3 or 4 days, that's not Dever. If there are 1,000 and you have 6 die within 3 days, one after the other, that's Dever. If they die within 1 day or 4 days, that's not Dever, that's not pestilence. And so too, you can work out that cheshbon. Fine, so that's what the Shulchan Aruch says. Okay, on that, the Maggid Avraham comes along and says, Ha'idna, and this is all a little background because these are going to be brought into discussion. The Maggid Avraham then says, Ha'idna, today, Ein Mesanim Klal B'Shas Dever. Today we do not fast when there is Dever, when there is pestilence. And he says, Diminusahu, because it's been tested. That when a person does not eat and drink, then he kind of becomes more susceptible to the change, the shinoi ha'avir, whatever is going around and causing the pestilence. So that is one of the big bar makoimos. The Maggid Avraham says that b'shas dever, when there's pestilence going on, no one should fast. And on the side of the Gilead Marsha quotes, which is the son of Rabbi Kiva Eger, Rabbi Shlomo Eger, he writes, so too b'shas dever, there's no avelus. There's no avelus, there's no mourning because of bitusa, because we don't want people to get afraid. So one of the things which have been quoted a lot, there's a lot of national fear right now, but there's a Ben Ishchai's commentary on the Gemara in Bava Kama is called Ben Yohiyada. And so the Ben Yohiyada on the Gemara in Bava Kama, Daf Samach. So the Gemara says when there is a Dever Be'ir, so one should walk in the side of the road, because in the middle of the road, the Malach HaMavos is walking in the middle. It says when there's Shalom Be'ir, you walk in the middle. Don't walk on the sides because the Malach HaMavos is going on the sides. Anyway, so in that Gemara, the Ben Ishchai says that there was once a person, he goes up to the Malach HaMavos and he says, how many people are you planning on taking? And so the Malach HaMavos says, 5,000, Rahman al-Tzlan. So afterwards, he says, okay, afterwards, I think 15,000 died. And says he meets him up again and he says, you're a shakran. You said you're only going to take 5,000. You took 10,000. So he said, no. He said, I kept my words. I only took 5,000. The other 10,000, he says that people took their own life because that was the pachad, right? That was the pachad and the fear. And so anyway, so in Siman, another source for Dever, so in Siman Kuf Tez Zayin in Yoredeya, which speaks about things which are prohibited because of sakana, that we have to guard our health, which is going to be this next week's parsha. V'nishmartem ha'oid l'nafshosechem. We have to stay very healthy and vigilant to guard our health. So the Ramah brings there, I think in Sif Hey, that when there's Dever Be'ir, so one is should run away. B'tchilas Dever, they should run away at the beginning. And if they can't run away at the beginning, so then the Mefarshim say you should stay inside and don't leave the house. So anyway, on there, the Pischei Tshuva, which is one of the commentaries to the Gemara, to the Shulchan Aruch, So the Piskei Tshuva says to look at the Tshuva of the Rashbash. So the Rashbash was a son of the Tashbates, of the Rashbats. So the Rashbash, which is a rabbi in Algeria, about before, I think, the Spanish expulsion, around that time. So the Rashbash, he writes that, that generally we have to go b'derech hamitzua, like the Rambam says, we have to go in the middle path. But when there's dever, so we have to try to remain very happy and keep our spirits up and to remain healthy and eat properly and to not exert ourselves too much. And he says that we should not make ourselves susceptible to anything, to, God forbid, any illnesses. So this is a little bit of the background about when there is dever, and the Kaf HaChaim as well speaks about a lot of stuff about when there's dever. Okay, but and one of the things he brings today was the Yortzeit of the Arizal, right? Okay, so fine. So the Arizal's. So let's begin the sugya itself. So we're going to start. Find the Shulchan Aruch. Okay. So we know we are of course in the 9 days. We'll almost finish with the 9 days, and so in Halachos Tisha B'av, which is Siman Taf Kuf Nun Daled. So we have all the different restrictions, right? Siman Taf Kuf Nun Daled speaks. So this is within Orach Chaim. Says Tisha B'av is aser b'rechitza. We're not allowed to bathe, sicha, anointing ourselves, nila sandal, wearing the leather shoes, tash b'shemita, marital relations, aser likros b'torah. We're not supposed to read Torah, neviim ksubim. Okay, goes on. So these are it begins with the restrictions. So we're going to, the first thing it starts off is this restriction. I guess we'll go ala seder. So it begins, the first restriction it discusses is the restriction of studying Torah, right? So there's restrictions on studying Torah, except for the different parts which are sad, and that's because Pekudei Hashem Yishar Mesamchei Lev, right? Torah is supposed to make us happy, which should be one of the greatest thing in our life, and therefore there are restrictions on studying Torah. So it's interesting. One of the first discussions when this is brought in the Sefer Piskei Teshuvos from the Stei Chemed is there an obligation to study Torah on Tisha B'av itself, and that's related to whether an avol, because just like we're avelim, we're mourning for the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So there was someone named the Mate Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda Ayash, which also was from, we mentioned, Algeria. And he said he learned that all these things where it speaks about, you could learn on Tisha B'av, Eoiv, the sad parts of Yirmiyahu, right? The different parts of the Gemara, Medrash Eicha, things like this. So he learns you don't have to learn. Just like an avol, does an avol have to learn Torah? If they want to learn, they can learn these things, but they're not obligated to learn. But other poskim, which the Stei Chemed quotes, argue on that, and that the Rebbe as well brings that there's a chiyuv of Talmud Torah on Tisha B'av. So Tisha B'av, that's one of the things they bring. There's an obligation to learn, and so that's the first thing. We're just going ala seder. So there are a few halachas which deal with what one is allowed to study on Tisha B'av, but we're going to learn it not only what one is allowed, but one is mechuyev, just like there's a chiyuv of Talmud Torah all the time. The chiyuv of Talmud Torah applies on Tisha B'av as well. So, but of course, the main restrictions are eating and drinking. So first it starts off, it speaks about ubaris umenikus, pregnant women and nursing women, they fast on Tisha B'av. It says, Misanas mashlemis, they have to fast and they have to complete the fast just like on Yom Kippur. But the other three fasts, which are connected with the Churban Beis Hamikdash, Shivas HaBatamas, Asar B'Teves, Tzom Gedalia, they are exempt from fasting. And nonetheless, they shouldn't eat for tainug and for pleasure. They should only eat for kiyum vlad, for what the baby needs, for what the fetus needs. Okay, so that's the first chiddush. So that it's comparing Tisha B'av to Yom Kippur. Now, Yom Kippur, we know the fast is deraisa, right? There's a biblical obligation to fast. as mentioned in the Torah, right? And that's a chiyuv of Kores. And Tisha B'av, it says, and they made it Tisha B'av like Yom Kippur. However, Tisha B'av, the fast, is only Derabanan, or to be more correct, it's from Divrei Kabbalah, right? But Divrei Kabbalah sometimes, which it's mentioned by the Nevi'im, right? The Gemara speaks about Tzom Revi, Tzom Chamishi, these, and they're all alluded to in the Nevi'im. And the Gemara, so there's a Gemara there on Rosh Hashanah, I think Daf Yud Ches. It says Tzom Revi, Tzom Chamishi. It mentions all the fasts by the Hebrew month. It will be L'Beis Yehuda, L'Sas, and L'Simcha. And the Gemara seems to be a stira. It's a Tzom, but L'Sas and L'Simcha. So the Gemara says depends. If there are Gzeres Malchus, there are decrees for the Goyim, so then it's a Tzom, and the Tzom, the fast is obligatory. But if there's no decree from the Goyim, and there's Sas and V'Simcha, so you don't have to fast. But if there's neither one, so the Gemara says, Ratzu Masanim, Ratzu Ein Masanim. It's basically, it was left up to us. And the Ramban brings, and this is brought later by the Torah, that now we, the Jewish people, accepted upon themselves to fast, which is why in Siman Tafkuf Nun, the Mechaber brings, Hakol Chayavim L'sanis Arbat Tzomos Halalo. Today, everyone has to be fast these four fasts, right? The four is including Tisha B'av. V'asur lifreitz getter, and one is not allowed to make any breaches. And so the reason why the Mechaber brings this strong lashon is because really midinah de Gemara we don't have to fast. Although they bring Rav Soloveitchik said that during World War II, so he says that was there was Gzeres Malchus, and then the Tzoim was Mikar Adin from the Gemara. But now it's been accepted that we fast even though there's no major persecution going on. But what's going to be relevant to our discussion is Tisha B'av, like the other ones, is Derabanan, right? Tisha B'av's Derabanan. The only thing is that although Tisha B'av's Derabanan, right, the other fasts, right, are like some Gedalia, Shivas B'Tammuz, right? As we know, they're only by day; they're not by night, and the only restrictions are rechitza. Are from eating and drinking, right? The rechitza and all the other restrictions do not apply. So although the other restrictions, the Maggid of Ram quotes from the Shlad that there's to be the Bal Nefesh should be machmer, but there's a famous Marshag, right? He was Reb Shimon Greenfeld, who was a posek in Hungary before the First World War, around that time, after the First World War. Anyway, so he says that. The Minhag's people are not machmir about those, and anyone who's been in the mikvah's been closed for a while, but generally people are makel, take hot showers, and on the other fasts. But anyway, so Tisha B'av, so the Chachamim gave Tisha B'av the same restrictions as Yom Kippur, right? But that is Midirabanan. And so in Sif Hey, the Mechaber is telling us that one of the chumras of Tisha B'av is the other fasts. A woman who is pregnant or nursing is pater. Now they're different shittas about that. The Ramah is a bit more machmer, but me'ikar adin, a pregnant or nursing woman, is pater for the other fasts, but they're chayiv on Tisha B'av. Now that's just basic halacha. However, that's assuming these ubris haminikas, these pregnant nursing women, are healthy. Comes along Sivav, which is what we're going to be concentrating on today. And we're going to deal with people who are unwell. So the Mechaber, when we say the Mechaber, we mean Yosef Kaira, right, the author of the Big Shulchan Aruch. He says a chaya, which a chaya is not here a midwife, but a chaya who kol shloshim yom, 30 days after childbirth, and a choila. And we're going to see what type of choila it is. But a choila, a person who's unwell, right? Shutzarech lechol, a choila which needs to eat. Ein srichim oimed. So we don't have to assess them. We don't have to go call a doctor and speak about their condition, whether they need to eat or not. So Shulchan Aruch says they don't need oimed with an aleph. They don't need to be assessed. Right away, we give them food. And this is going to be the big line here. Right? That when there's a case of choili, so the Chachamim never intended that the fast should apply to them. It doesn't apply b'makam choile, right? And so, nonetheless, the Ramah is a bit more machmir. The Ramah says, nonetheless, the custom is they do fast as long as there's not great great discomfort, and there's no concern for sakana. But hamekal lahifsid, that if one wants to be lenient, so they don't lose out, because once again, it does not apply b'makam choile. Now the question is, how sick do we say is sick that it doesn't apply, right? So first off, so the Mishnah Berurah explains that when we say a chaya, why do we say a chaya, woman after birth is pater for 30 days? He says, because we assume that she's weak, right? He says, mistama, we say, she is chalusha. She feels weak, and she's like a choyle shem b'sakana, as we know in Hilchos Shabbos, right? I mean, the Bir HaGra, the Vilna Gaon, on his comments on the Shulchan Aruch, he compares it to Shabbos, right? And just like Shabbos, so a woman after childbirth, there's stages, there's 7 days, there's 30 days, but for 30 days, she's like a choyle shem b'sakana, like a sick person, which it's not nothing that, how do we say it? It's maybe we translate it as an incapacitating illness, right? It's not a life-threatening illness, and she's weak, and therefore we assume she's pater. And the Mishnah, so the Ramah is more machmir, but the Aruch HaShulchan says that today, we're weak after women are weak. It shouldn't be machmir within 30 days. Okay, and another example of choyle, the Maggid of Ram quotes this. The Mishnah Berurah brings a person chaser deya, which I guess some mental health, or they're lacking. They're chaser deya. They're suffering, but they've been better. They're getting better from day to day. So he says they're allowed to have meat and wine the whole week, and they shouldn't fast on Tisha B'av because there could be a setback for them. And so they don't need. So anyway, they don't need. The point is they don't need to be assessed because we assume that it doesn't apply for a choyle. Now, I'm just going to read out. This is a very good English book from Feldheim about Refu on Shabbos. Now, it's hard to put all the examples of a choyle she'ein bo sakana, but they have the sections. They list all the different levels of choyle on Shabbos and examples of who would be included in the category of incapacitated, right? So a person who's bedridden, right? Their illness is not life-threatening, but they feel so sick that they have to stay in bed. Could be someone with a severe cold, the flu. They're considered to be incapacitated. So, or even someone whose illness does not force them to stay in bed, like someone with severe diarrhea, but if it causes their whole body to hurt, to feel weak, sluggish, they're considered to be incapacitated. Furthermore, an illness which causes a person so much pain or discomfort that they cannot function normally, they're out of commission, right, so to speak. So they're considered to be incapacitated. For example, a person suffering with severe fungal infection or like a severe yeast infection, painful arthritis flare-up would typically not be in bed, but he might have so much pain and discomfort that he cannot function normally. When the condition becomes so bad that the patient would stop all activity and just go to bed, if that would help him, but in this case, it's not going to help him, so he doesn't stay in bed. So these are all he considers to be incapacitated. Once again, choyle she'ein bo sakana. Another example, a mild or moderate headache suffer localized pain, but he's still able to walk around and function. But if he has such a severe migraine to the extent that he feels weak all over, or to the extent that he must exert great effort to stay on his feet or to function normally, he would be considered incapacitated. He goes on, a person who cannot function normally because of psychological disorder, such as depression, anxiety disorder, is also incapacitated. So anyway, these are all examples, and they're marmakomis for all of these, of what he's calling a choyle she'ein bo sakana, and this is what the basic Shulchan Aruch is telling us in Sif Taf Kuf Nun Daled Sif Vav, that a woman within 30 days of childbirth, or a choyle, and a choyle which is ein bo sakana, incapacitated, is exempt from the fast. It does not apply. In other words, loy gazra means when the Chachamim made Tisha B'av, after the second temple or the first temple, second temple, after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, they never intended that it was that people who were unwell should fast. right? Once again, the Ramah is more machmir, says, it said even if, as long as it's not going to lead to sakana, they should still fast. But he says a mekel lehifsid, one who's mekel is not going to lose out. So now, so basically the background we've done so far is we've seen the basic halacha that the fast of Tisha B'av does not apply to a choila. I just want to emphasize first what it's. I'm going to skip to the last sif because I don't want to sound. It might sound too lenient so far. But the last sif in the simon says, anyone that eats and drinks on Tisha B'av, he will not see the simcha of Yerushalayim. Anyone that mourns on Yerushalayim will be zoicha to see the simcha of Yerushalayim. Right? Anyway, anyone who eats and drinks wine by the Sudam of Sekis, which Sudam of Sekis, we spoke about this last week, is the only time when meat and wine is usher mikra din, because any time before that it's just a minhag, right? Although it's brought in Shulchan Aruch, it says regarding him. The pasuk says that their sins should be on their bones. So anyway, so yes, eating. So the Shulchan Aruch concludes the simon that eating and drinking on Tisha B'av is a very severe thing, but it's only for a person which the Chazal intended they should fast. Right? We're going to see that if a person is not supposed to fast and they fast, so that itself could be considered an avera. Okay, so we're going to now move to. So with that's one source, and of course we started with what it said in a time of dever. So the Magen Avraham says, so no one should fast because it's dangerous. So now the question is going to be, what is the situation now? And obviously everything that is being discussed, this is very general. Everyone has to speak with their Moira Rabbi Michoel, their Rav, and their doctor, right? So, but this is just a little bit of what's going on right now. So about a month ago, there was a psak that came out from Argentina, and many people might be aware of this already. So I was aware of this, but actually I only learned it inside. I glanced through it very quickly. At the time, someone called me, and they said, "Do I have to fast?" I said, "What do you mean? Would you have to fast?" He says, "Yeah, because you didn't see this tshuva of Rabbi Fegelstock of where it's in South America." I'm like, "I didn't see it." So he sent it to me, and I couldn't believe it. So this came out just a little less than a month ago. So right before Shivas of B'Tammuz, Rabbi Fegelstock is says Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Fegelstock is I think he's in Argentina. He was here he came here a few times for Rabbi Duda leaders, the Chabad house, the mikveh that was built there. He's a big mumche mikvois, very big Talmud Chacham. And so he put out a psak. He was asked by the rabbi, it's a Shem Tov and Rabbi Greenblatt of Uruguay, regarding the fast. And this is written in Hebrew and in Spanish. So Spanish, okay, I don't really follow so much. But so he says like this, Rabbi Fegelstock writes to them in Hebrew, Ma hadin hayoim, what's the din with fasting Shivas of B'Tammuz and Tisha B'av? And so Tisha B'av is what's going to get to us right now. He says, the matzav today in the world, lahavanasi, the way I understand it, is everywhere they're choilim. And it's really totally on the place. There are some places which have more choilim, they have more sick people. Some people have less choilim, but there's nowhere where everyone is healthy. Now, obviously, there's nowhere in the world anywhere where everyone is healthy, but he means here specifically with the corona. And therefore, every place there's sakana. The only thing, it's mishtana, what is the achuz of the sakana? What is the degree of the danger in every single place? Some places there's more, some places there's less. And therefore, Lahavanasi says, according to my understanding, and a lot of people were a bit upset that this tshuva was put on the COL in different places, and I didn't see it there, but I was told that it was a little bit mistranslation, and maybe it was being misapplied to places which it didn't apply. But anyway, right now we're reading the tshuva which was asked by rabbis in Uruguay right before Shivas of B'Tammuz about Shivas of B'Tammuz and Tisha B'av. And so he's writing to the rabbis in Uruguay, like there's sakana everywhere, a little bit less, a little bit more. And they're even in places which they opened up the shuls or lahavdil, the marketplaces, the shops, there's still sakana. right? Because sometimes it was only like there was a famous letter that was going around that was put out by a rabbi, I think Meir Twersky from Yeshiva University. And he wrote there at the time a very fascinating letter, which Rav Hershel Schachter said it's a mitzvah to read. That's right when they opened everything up in New York. And he said the whole point of that letter was saying just because they opened up the shops doesn't mean we should open up the shuls, because our bar, for sakana is a lot greater, our threshold for sakana, than in the world outside, the non-Jewish world. So okay, for the economy, it's okay that there should be a number of casualties, but that's not necessarily our bar of sakana. But anyway, so he says, therefore, just because they've opened up shuls and even the shuk, there's still sakana. Therefore, lahavanasi, the dion in the chubas are apply bismaneno. And so what he's going to bring is we're going to see some of the chubas during the time of cholera, right? And he feels, not everyone feels that way, as we're going to see, but Rabbi Fegelshtek feels that the chuvas which discuss cholera still apply today. And therefore, he says, the sikum of everything now he's going to bring a lot of stuff, we're going to go through it a little bit, but he's just going to give you the sikum of everything. The hoira haklali, anyone who asks, you should not fast at all, eat regularly, don't be medaktek b'shurim, not even eating small amounts. And so when this came out, everyone was talking about this because, wow, when is the last time this happened? Probably since, the Spanish flu 100 years ago, who knows what, right? When such a tshuva was written in our times, he's saying that nobody should fast, right? No one should fast, and everyone should eat, right? And not even b'shurim. Then he says, someone wants to fast, and b'derech klal, they feel good when they fast. And the fast doesn't weaken them, because we know everyone fasts differently, and they want to be so they're allowed to be machmir upon themselves, and they can start fasting. If they feel well, then, and if they don't leave their house, and they remain home the entire day, then that's better than fasting, than going to shul. I just saw also earlier today, it's not relevant because no one's going to shul today, right around here at least. But someone asked Rabbi Yashiv that if he goes, his wife, Baruch Hashem, she's got all the kids and everything, and she said, if I go to shul, my wife cannot fast. But if I stay home, my wife will be able to fast. So Rabbi Yashiv said it's more important that your wife fasts and just don't go to shul. Anyway, so Rav Fegelshtek is saying if a person's able to fast, then and they want to be machmir, then stay home, don't go to shul, only fast. Someone who wants to be machmir and eat pachas mikashir, right? And within the time, less than the quantity of and within less than the time, just like on Yom Kippur, then that's still considered if they were fasting a little bit. And since there are many opinions, what are shiurim, how much is the time? It depends how healthy a person is. So everyone should ask their Rav, right? But the most machmir is to wait every 10 minutes and to eat just 30. I guess 30. It's within volume, but what is it? They're not grams, but 3 teaspoons. And he says you can put in honey with water or fruit juice or grape juice, something which has lots of calories. Okay, fine. And then he discusses all about to do with aneda. We're not going to go through that aneda. So that was his psak. His psak is really no one should fast. People should fast for sure. If you want to be machmir, you can stay at home and fast. So what is the source for this? So he quotes the Magen Avraham that we began with, that when there's dever, when there's a magefa, a plague of some sort, that it's dangerous to fast. And then he quotes the Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer writes, he said, I spoke with an expert doctor, and the doctor said, if you leave home with an empty stomach, a liber kana, on a fast day, dama ben afshor, that a person is like he's taking his life in his own hands. When there's cholera, now people have pointed out the cholera, right? People, you have to eat and drink because people would get they would lose all their liquids, lose the fluids, and that corona is not the same thing. But anyway, but the Chassam Sofer says it's very dangerous to go out on sun without eating, and therefore even only if a person stays home, right? And they don't leave, then they should fast bichidus at home. Okay. But if they want to fast, stay home, don't walk out the door. The El Yerabba also writes today we don't fast at all when there's a dever. The Maram Shik was the main student of the Chassam Sofer, also writes. Someone asked my opinion regarding fasting of Tisha B'av, where there's a choili, right? So he quotes the Ramban. The Ramban and many other Rishonim say that a choile she'en bo sakana does not fast and should eat, right? We feed him, and even there doesn't have to be sakana. Choile she'en bo sakana, even there's no danger, right? Because he repeats because b'makam choile they were never goizer. The Bir Agra, the Vilna Gaon writes, right, that we allow a chaya, a woman who gave birth, to wear shoes, and we allow a choile on Yom Kippur to do ointment, to put cream on, since those are only derabanan, because b'makam choile legazru. So over here, the whole thing is derabanan. So for sure it doesn't apply by them, and that's the Maram Shik. And then, last but not least, Rav Fegelstock quotes the Tzemach Tzedek, and everyone has been quoting the Tzemach Tzedek. So the Tzemach Tzedek wrote a tshuva to his son, right? He had a number of sons, but his son, Yosef Yitzchak. So he wrote to Yosef Yitzchak, who the Frierdiker was named after. So he writes to him, I'm writing you, don't be machmer chas v'shalom now to eat. He says, don't eat milchiks during the 9 days, because there's an Isser Gadol Shel Torah, wow, lahachmer. There's a great biblical prohibition of machmer in this, and you know that Maich Lechalav Hem Sukanim. Now, I don't know if he was lactose intolerant, what the story was with milchiks there, but he says it's known that Maich Lechalav milchiks are Mesukanim mitzad hamachla. Okay, I guess mitzad the illness that was, I guess, the cholera that was going on then, that some had milchiks, was very bad, and therefore you should have flesh. He goes on to say, even by the Sudam of Sekis, you should rely on the lenient opinions and have poultry, have chicken, right? By the Sudam of Sekis, he says, Chalila, don't deviate from this, right? So the whole 9 days, including the Sudam of Sekis. And then he says at the end, and I'm paraphrasing here, skipping, Gam I'm warning you, Shaloi Tisana, don't fast at all. Don't fast. He says, Klal Beker, do not fast. Don't even start to fast. And now maybe his son was a bit unwell, and he says, V'gam lanashim brim, even healthy people. Yesh lahakol, we can be lenient. And v'chein morim b'medunasenu, that's how we're paskening b'medunasenu, which I guess was Russia then. And he says, someone who wants to be machmir upon themselves, they should eat pachas mikashir, which means 2/3 of an egg, right? A bay is usually about 50 grams, so 2/3 of that, of bread, every 6 minutes, and definitely don't be machmir, right? Right. Sorry, and that's enough to be machmir, to eat b'shiurim. But you, he says, ach ata, loy tachmir klal, not you, not your wife, and with Hashem's great mercy, he will remove this machla from us. So that's the first tshuva, kuf. So kuf ches, that Tzemach Tzedek wrote to his son. Another tshuva he wrote, he also writes, we can allow a bari and kolshkin, someone, a healthy person, someone who walks in the streets, that they shouldn't be machmer at all, because the chumrah is a kula, right? A chumrah in this area will be a kula by chashash sakanas nefashis, which is famous. There's a famous a line. The Rebbe quoted this a number of times from the Brisker Rav, right? So they asked Reb Chaim of Brisk. Someone once commented to him that, why are you so makel when it comes to fasting on Yom Kippur? Because apparently he was very, very lenient with the fast. So he says, I'm not makel on Yom Kippur, I'm machmer on pikuach nefesh, right? I'm not lenient in the fast of Yom Kippur, I'm machmer when it comes to saving a life. So that's what the Tzemach Tzedek, which was before Reb Chaim, right, is saying, that the chumrah kula, right? A chumrah in the fast is a kula, is a leniency in the chashash sakanas nefashis, and it says v'chai b'hem, right? The Torah says in Achrei Mois v'chai b'hem, we're supposed to be living by the Torah and not to come to suffix sakana, right? And there it goes on to say, therefore, one should not be machmir, and we should be mekayim. We have this concept of unashalma parim svasena. We say this about karbanos. So today we don't have the karbanos. So our davening is in place of karbanos. So the Tzemach Tzedek says we can be Mekayim that through Eicha, Kinnis, with a Leiv Nishbar, we said with a broken heart, because, and this is a bit applicable to us now, I guess, he says, Al Shabbat Seinu Helu Matzav, because of our sins, there's a matzav that we can't fast. Maybe we could say this, there's a matzav that Avnasena that we can't daven in shul. But Tzemach Tzedek says that's where you can have a Leiv Nishbar, we can't fast. And he says you can make up the fast El. Okay, so I don't think the Rabban, okay, I don't, Halavai, anyone which is unwell, they would be able to make up the fast later. Okay, one more small clip of a tshuva is, he writes, and this is the best one, which everyone's been quoting this, is then he says, if there's no machla, and so the last piece, the last tshuva, so everyone has been quoting, and this is, and you have to see it yourself, in the beer, so this is Tafkuf Nundala, the beer halacha, which on the Mishnah Berurah, you have the Shulchan Aruch at the top, and the bottom you have the Mishnah Berurah by the Chavetz Chaim, and then the beer halacha was a little bit more be'iyun. So on that, there's a little star, the Dibur Maskos B'Makom Choyle. He quotes a sefer called Pischei Olam. So Pischei Olam was printed. It's funny. I was going to quote. We'll say first the quote. The Pischei Olam says, if the machla of cholera is not strong, chas v'shalom, then people should eat less than the shear, less than the quantity within, spread out over time. That's called eating b'shiurim, just like one does on Yom Kippur. Now, this is a chiddush because generally, virtually all poskim say that one, as we just saw the basis of Shulchan Aruch. On Yom Kippur, if a person cannot fast and needs to eat, first off, it's only a heter for someone who's a choyle sheyesh bo sakana. It's got to be that they're potentially the risk of their life. And then when we allow them to eat, they have to eat b'shiurim in small amounts, small quantities. Right? Generally, it's accepted that does not apply by all the other fasts. All the other fasts, including Tisha B'av, if a person is patur from fasting, then they eat, right? So they're different, some poskim will say, don't eat by night. Sometimes they'll say, maybe try, all right, only eat the next day. Don't eat, ice cream and candy and things like this. But when they're patur, they don't have to eat b'shiurim. Right, that's virtually all the poskim say this. Tzitz Eliezer has a beautiful tshuva summarizing all the opinions to Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. But anyway, that's virtually everyone paskins that way. All right, so comes along and this is the only opinion quoted here from the Bir Halacha, the Mishnah Berurah is quoting a sefer called Pischei Olam that says if the pandemic is not strong, then eat less than the shear. And that way you won't be uprooting the fast completely. And someone who wants to fast when the machla is not strong, it's not bezam, then we should suggest them. He says, they shouldn't leave their house the entire day. And when they leave their house, and it's interesting, and we should force them that when they do leave their house, upiv, they should cover their mouth and their nose, a chatichas kumper, which kumper is some type of mask, with a little bit of mint inside of it, maybe to help them breathe. And so everyone is saying, who is this Pischei Olam? So I was like, wow, when I saw this, wow, this is a mask. Now, the Rabbi Usher Weiss, in one of his shiurim, he was speaking, he's been speaking for the past 4 months. He's written already a whole kuntras. He's got a book which is coming out. It's going to be like 300 pages with all the tshuvas he's written about Corona, which is fascinating. Unfortunately, they've been practical. But so he was saying, in Yerushalayim, they're not wearing the masks because it's Sionim, because the Zionists. He says it's not Sionim, it's the Mishnah Berurah, right? So in reality, the Mishnah Berurah quoting the Pischei Olam. So I right away called Rabbi Telzner. I said, who is this Pischei Olam? So Pischei Olam, he says, what's a sefer? He says, everyone has a sefer. So this was printed by Rav Hillel Medalia, printed a sefer of his grandfather, and his grandfather was, I forgot the first name, was Rav Karasik, and was a Lubavitcher. Rav Hillel Medalia, he was a rabbi in, I think, where was it? In somewhere in Ireland, I think Dublin, and later he went to, he was a rabbi in Leeds, and then he was a chief rabbi of Antwerp for 20-something years. But he reprinted his grandfather's sefer, and his father was originally a Lubavitcher, and his grandfather, right, Karasik. Anyway, and so the Pischei Olam is quoting the Divrei Nehemiah, which is quoting the Tzemach Tzedek. And so you see here in the Tshuva of the Tzemach Tzedek, so Siman Kuf Yud, so this is what the Tzemach Tzedek writes, that he writes these exact words that verbatim, right, if a person, right, they should eat pachas mikashir, they should eat less than the quantity, and they should go out, if they do have to go out, they should go out wearing masks. So it's fascinating. Everyone's been quoting this, but it's actually really the Tzemach Tzedek. So anyway, so that is so that's the background to Rav, getting back to Rabbi Fegelstock, his tshuva, and based on this, that's why he wrote that he feels that no one has to fast, because he feels we're in the middle of, it's like cholera, like a pandemic. Now, a lot of I don't know anyone who agreed with him. Now, obviously, everything has its zman hamakor, right? Time and place. So that was his tshuva. So there was going to read another one, and this one just came out. Also, people have been discussing this. Rabbi Moshe Bronsdorfer. Rabbi Moshe Bronsdorfer, he was actually here a number of years ago. He gave a shir in the Koil. His father was a famous Rav Meir Bronsdorfer, which was their told us what's it called? Told us Avar Yitzchak, I think that's what they are. Anyway, I think so. He wrote a tshuva just a few days ago for leading up to Tisha B'av, and Rabbi Moshe Bronsdorfer writes to a certain Rav in Bnei Brak. A certain Rav in Bnei Brak wrote, he says, listen, when I was in, I asked the Shevet HaLevi, Rav Vosner, a number of years ago, that I have a custom that I fast when there's slichas. I fast, but I drink, right? Which that's not our type of fast, right? Usually, that like the Goy Shavelt, they call fasting, just drinking is fasting. He says, I fast, but I drink. And I drink pachas mikashir. I guess he drinks less than a cheekful every, who knows, maybe there's different opinions, every 10 minutes, every 4 minutes, whatever it is. And I asked Rav Vosner, am I doing anything? And he told me, no, it's an inyan. There's still a toelis in such a fast like that. And so, but your father would tell people when it comes to the other fasts, that you don't, when it comes to other fasts besides Yom Kippur. So he's writing this to Moshe Bronsdorfer. So this guy wrote, your father, Meir Bronsdorfer, would tell people that you should not eat, you don't eat b'shurim. When you don't have to fast, you don't fast at all. So this guy asks, Moshe Bronsdorfer, must be that the Shevet HaLevi held like the Pischei Olam, which says you eat b'shurim if you can't fast. And your father held like the Brisker Rav, which the Brisker Rav says when you can't fast, then you don't eat b'shurim. It's kind of like in Hilchos Shabbos, there's a chikir if when Shabbos is pushed off for a choila, is it hutra or hudcha? Is it completely kind of, it's like a weekday, or it's still Shabbos and you try to minimize the malacha? But anyway, so he writes, so Moshe Bronsdorfer writes back, and he says, listen, he basically says, you got it all wrong. Everyone agrees that if a person is exempt from fasting on Tisha B'av or any of the other fasts, he doesn't eat b'shiurim, he doesn't eat in small quantities. He can eat regularly. He eats like a regular person. He says, all of these tshuvas, the Pischei Olam, which we said is quoting the Tzemach Tzedek, any place it says to eat b'shiurim, it's talking about where there was a cholera, a Makas Medina, some type of pandemic. He says the Shevet HaLevi writes in another tshuva like that. And he goes on, anyway, quotes Abaram Shik, all these sources, and he concludes at the end, it's quite a 4-page tshuva letter, and at the end he writes, so now in Eretz Yisrael, and we know Eretz Yisrael is experiencing a very bad second wave, right? So he says, where Corona has spread in a way where it's Oyum V'Noira, Rachman Litzlan, many people have died, Rachman Litzlan, and there are those that they're in a critical condition, and they need Rachma Shemayim Merubim. So he says like this, L'chora, he's saying we should be paskening to the tzibur, ba'ofen klali, in a general way, that no one should fast. The bream and the cholim, healthy people and people who are unwell. However, the bream, those that are healthy, they should eat b'shiurim. They should eat in the small quantities, and people who are unwell should not eat b'shiurim at all. They should eat. They should not fast at all. However, he says that's really l'chora. That's how we should paskin. But as long as a psak like that has not come out, then those that are healthy have to fast, right? Those that were sick and they've gotten better, but there's still a concern that, but there's still a concern, right? Then they shouldn't fast. They should eat b'shiurim, because according to doctors, sometimes they haven't healed 100%. There could be something inside of the internal organs, and it could come back. Fine, but, and he quotes the Shut Ramatz, which is quoted by the Stei Chemed. The Stei Chemed writes, also, this is the Stei Chemed has a long piece about this. So he quotes the Shut Ramatz. I think, where is the Ramatz from? I forgot. He writes that the maskana is even the machmirim, those that are machmir, if there's a ktsas chashash sakana for regular people, that where it says they don't have to speak to doctors, and even if doctors say there's no danger to fast, we don't care, because such a choila cannot be detected. And he says, therefore, if the simsus machla is spreading everywhere, he says all the bream, even people who are healthy, they're considered to be like choilim regarding this, and it's usher to fast because one is not allowed to put themselves in danger. And he quotes the Magen Avraham, which we started with today, that when a person fasts, they become more susceptible, right? And Loibi Boy, a city which already has the illness, right? And many people have died, but even in a place where this illness has not reached them, right? But nonetheless, there's concern, and therefore they should not fast. Anyone who's machmir, he says, it's a shock, and we should announce publicly that no one should fast, even someone who's healthy, right? Okay, in Chamira Sakanta Misura, there's a concept that sakana is even more stringent than Isser, and he says we have to publicize this, and okay. So that is a bit of the tshuva, the Ramatz quoted by the Stei Chemed. And then, so Rabbi Moshe Bronsdorfer concludes, so you can see clearly, Dvarim Brurim, that in a place where the illness has spread, this magefa, he says one should not fast on Tisha B'av, both Brim and Cholim, healthy people and people who are unwell. And be'emes, on one hand, Chamir Sakanta Misura, and I heard, then he said, from an expert doctor, Yirei Shamayim, right? I guess Yirei Shamayim, because there's a whole sugya whether doctors have nemanos, whether you can believe a doctor who's not Jewish or not religious. But anyway, an expert doctor, Dr. Michoel Stern, he said Shivas B'Tammuz. There were a number of people who fasted Shivas B'Tammuz, and afterwards they got corona, and it got so bad that it brought them to sakana. And many of them are still in critical condition, right, as a result of the fasting Shivas B'Tammuz. And therefore, there's room to paskin for the public, even for the healthy and the cholim, that they shouldn't fast. However, to give such a psak, he says, needs oiz v'satzumois. One has to have a real breakkeit, as they say, to give such a psak. And that is only the Gdoilei Yisrael are allowed to give such a psak like that, the biggest Gdoilim. So therefore, if such a psak will be like that, then those that are healthy would eat b'shiurim, shaloi tishtakach Torah Tisha B'av. So we should know there's such a concept, Torah Tisha B'av. In other words, then we would do like what the Tzemach Tzedek says. However, he says, as long as such a psak has not gone out like that, then only the cholim should fast, and the bream should, the people who are healthy should not fast yet, because such a psak has not yet gone out. So that is Moshe Bronsdorfer, and this just came out recently. And okay, so there's another thing that I found on the internet, which is interesting. Some organization called Oimek Hapshat, right? So everyone can look it up, Oimek Hapshat, and they put out things by Hilchasa. Okay, by Hilchasa, and this is on was found on a website called Beinenu. But anyway, so, and on their, this was just a recent one, 274. Maybe this was their most recent publication. So they collect all, what's fascinating, but they collected all the psukim of the rabbis, of the poskim right now, what they're saying about fasting. So they bring all the background, how it doesn't apply to for a choila, and okay, they bring all the background, and they explain about cholera, and let me just get to the psak over here. So they quote Rav Sternbuch has a tshuva that says he's the head of the Eida Charedis, that he writes, but when we speak about a choila who's patur from fasting, right, a choila she'ein pasakana, he says even if it's not going to make them worse, they're still patur, right? Any choila she'ein pasakana, it's not going to make the situation right make their health go down. They have a patur. The choila it does not apply to them at all, right? So they quote like this. They begin with Rav Zilberstein, right? Rav Zilberstein says anyone who has corona, right, they're for sure considered like a choila she'ein b'sakana, and they're patur from fasting, right? They have so many different shittas here, so they divide it up like this. They have 3 levels, right? So Rav Zilberstein says there's 3 levels. If he had corona, so he's patur. So if it's a suffix, what if it's a suffix whether a person has it, and they're waiting for maybe they haven't taken it. They're in what's it called? When they go isolation, they're in isolation. I guess maybe they're waiting for their test results. Then he said, if they're in isolation and they have a suffix, then they should eat b'shiurim, right? If they feel well, right, and they're not in isolation, so then they should eat, right? What about a person which has tested positive, but they don't have symptoms, and so they quote a whole, right? Now, I spoke to another doctor today. He said, well, there could be a lot of errors. They could be tested positive. There could be a mistake in the test. But anyway, so he quotes Rabbi Usher Weiss that said, someone with corona with symptoms is a choila she'ein b'sakana, and they should eat, and they should not be makpid on shiurim. If they feel healthy, even though they're in isolation, they can fast regularly, right? Even if they've tested positive and they feel well, so they're like a bari, because in one of his shiurim I heard he says, well, does Torah recognize because you've tested positive? Is that what makes a person choila l'chora? We go by the symptoms, but he said nonetheless. He said if they've tested positive without symptoms, then everyone should do what their Rav paskins, right? Because maybe there could be concern that the fast could make things worse. He quotes Rav Moshe Shel Klein, I think he was in Rav Buster's based in, said if he's tested positive without symptoms, he should fast, right? Only if he's tested positive with symptoms, he should fast. But anyway, he quotes a whole list of other poskim say what about only symptoms? What if they're only symptoms, but he hasn't tested positive? So we follow the symptoms. He should fast. Anyway, he quotes a whole list of poskim today, and but there are lots of psukim coming out, lots of new psukim, and they quote, I must have collected every single shita which exists there. But the bottom line is people have, for example, one of them, Rav Yehuda Kenner Shlita, he says it's not like, he was more conservative. He says it's not like cholera, and therefore someone who is healthy, right, even if they're above 90, they should fast, right? And someone which has corona, right, doesn't have to fast no matter what age they are, right? And so too, someone who has symptoms does not need to fast. Of course, there is a Kaf HaChaim which says someone who's super, super old, right there. That's not talking about Yom Kippur, but the other fasts, where they don't have to fast, right there, right? Because once again, what is it? A choila she'ein b'sakana. But anyway, so we see there are many, many psukim going on, and therefore, anyone who has symptoms, right, and the choila she'ein b'sakana, it doesn't apply. Someone who's totally healthy. So there has not been a psak to come out, like, just to summarize, like the Rabbi Fegelstuck, which says no one should fast, or Moshe Bronsdorfer is not given such a psak. He said, but if such a psak would come out, then even healthy people would fast but eat b'shiurim. But right now, just to have clarity, someone who is unwell has a patur. Obviously, they should speak to the rabbi and doctor, but they don't have to fast. They shouldn't fast. Someone who's healthy should fast, and anyone who is in doubt should speak to their rav and their doctor. Now, we have just another couple minutes about, there are other things. Obviously, people who have, a kidney disease, diabetes, if they're on certain drugs that lower the blood sugars, there are certain things, right, which fasting, dehydration could be dangerous, so a person would have to speak with their doctor. Now, just one more issue, which is quite fascinating, is there another tshuva came out from Rabbi Hershel Schachter about washing the hands, right? So we know one of the restrictions, we know rechitza is also in Tisha B'av, d'Rabbanan, right? It says bein b'cham and bein b'tzoyin, this is Sif Zion, and even to stick one's finger in water is asur. So we know today, right, the health department is saying we should continue washing our hands and sanitizing our hands. So when it comes to washing, right, so washing our hands, so we wash up to, when we wash negelvasser, we wash up to the knuckles. It says if a person is sick and they have to wash for bread, they wash up to the wrist, but generally we wash up to our knuckles. So what if a person, so the poskim say, if a person leaves the bathroom, if you're used to washing always 3 times with the quart, you can wash 3 times, but only up to the knuckles. Is a person allowed to wash up to their wrist? So Hershel Schachter put out a psak recently, I think just last week, and he said, if someone is very makpid, right, they're very makpid on all the laws and they're following, then obviously it's because it's a chashash pikuach nefesh, and therefore they can wash up to their wrist because pikuach nefesh overrides. Otherwise, then he said, if a person is not so makpid, not everyone is makpid, right? As we know, till now, there's some people wearing masks, not masks. Then he says, there's a concept called shomer p'sayim Hashem, which the Rebbe has, we don't have time to bring it, but shomer p'sayim Hashem means Hashem guards the fools, and one can rely on that lechatchila. So someone who's not makpid, then even if then they should only wash up to the knuckles. So too, the most recent shir, Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, he's the chief Sephardi rabbi. He also said, you don't need to wash. He said, we're always washing our hands. He said, the people, the non-religious, they're not so hygienic. We're much more hygienic. He said, he says, by us, for Tisha B'av one day, it's enough, just wash up to your knuckles. But if one did feel, right, they need to wash the whole other parts of the body. So that it's only rechitza shel tainug, which is prohibited. So using this gel is not a rechitza shel tainug. So if one is makbid, so definitely that would be allowed. Okay, so I think are there any other issues? I think we're pretty much out of time. Do we have 2 minutes? If anyone has any questions, so you could welcome to any questions. You can unmute yourself and ask a question. We have 1 more minute. We have time for 1 question, 2 questions. Anyway, anyone? Okay, then if not, we're just going to conclude. Rabbi Fegelstock concludes his tshuva with a story from Rav Zevin. Rav Zevin writes that in Sipurei Chasidim, in 1868, there was cholera, and they sent a shliach from Kremenchuk to Reb Aaron of Chernobyl for Shabbos, and it was Parshas Re'eh, and he brought upon that Reb Aaron Chernobyl should daven, he should ask Rachamim that this illness should go away, and so it's Shabbos by the Suda. And he quotes Orach Chaim. He says the Orach Chaim writes that Moshe Rabbeinu said to Bnei Yisrael, "Rei Anoichi." Right? It was Parshas Rei, which will be in a few weeks. Rei Anoichi. He says, "Look at me." Right? And I'll give you bracha, but I can't say that. But what can I say? V'klala im loy. He says, "V'klala im loy." If you, Ribono Shel Olam, if you will not give them a curse, then I promise to you that Yishmu el mitzvahs Hashem. If you will not give them the curse, then the Yidden will listen to you. And he says, Chalila, you've already given them the klala. And what's come out from this? For the 9 days, right? I myself have written, people should eat flesh. They should eat flesh during the 9 days. Tisha B'av, I told all the Yidden that they shouldn't fast. And therefore, Hashem, Ribono Shel Olam, v'klala im loy. If you will not curse them, if you will not give them this curse, then Yishmo mitzvahs Hashem. Then Yidden will listen to the mitzvahs Hashem, and Hashem Yisparech will guard the Yidden and befrat the city of Kremenchuk. So, therefore, we're in a situation that we cannot daven in shul, and people are missing mikveh and tefillah b'tzibur, and lots of different things. And so Hashem should make everyone healthy so we can keep all the mitzvahs. And like the Rambam says, at Tisha B'av will become a big Yom Tov, and we should be zocher to the building of the base of Mikdash immediately, and everyone should be healthy. And once again, refuah shlema for Yeshua ben Yamin ben Rivka. Okay, thank you all for joining.
Amen. Shkoyach. Thank you, Rabbi Stern. Great share.
Rabbi Stern.
Yes, Doctor.
How are you? Good now. Listen, this COVID is doing a good thing because the whole temple coming down is Lashon Hara. There's no Lashon Hara now.